3 days after the Mercedes illegal engines news broke, and nobody's denying it. Not Mercedes, not Red Bull, not even the FIA. In fact, the governing body has quietly admitted they're monitoring the situation. We're talking about a compression ratio scandal that could blow the 2026 season wide open before it even starts. Here's what we know. The FIA reduced the compression ratio from 18 to 16 for 2026, trying to limit the thermal engine's power as they tripled the electric output. Simple enough, right? Wrong, because Mercedes and allegedly Red Bull found a way to game the system. The FIA checks compression ratios when the engine is cold, but some manufacturers discovered how to hit that magical 18 ratio once the engine heats up. Thermal expansion of pistons, connecting rods, and internal components changes dimensions and potentially the compression ratio itself. It's ingenious, it's technical, and the FIA apparently didn't see it coming. But here's where it gets spicy. According to Corriere dello Sport, about 7 months ago, a Mercedes engineer who jumped ship to Red Bull powertrains spilled the secret. Red Bull tried to replicate the system, but there's a crucial difference. Mercedes has been working on this for a year and allegedly cannot produce an engine that respects the 16 compression limit. Red Bull, on the other hand, can. This means Mercedes, McLaren, Williams, and Alpine could all be racing with illegal engines, while Ferrari, Honda, Red Bull, and Audi are playing by the rules. The FIA is facing an impossible choice. Ban the Mercedes system and 4 teams can't compete, or allow it and watch the sport's credibility crumble under an avalanche of protests and disqualifications. So, how did we get here? Let's rewind to 2019, when Ferrari found themselves in a remarkably similar situation. The Scuderia had discovered what many called the most ingenious fuel flow trick in Formula One history. While the FIA's fuel flow meter checked consumption at specific intervals, Ferrari found a way to inject extra fuel in the gaps between measurements. It was brilliant, it was controversial, and when the FIA finally caught on, it led to one of the most secretive deals in the sport's history. Ferrari's punishment was swift and brutal. Their engine was neutered for the 2020 season, turning their cars into mobile chicanes. Charles Leclerc and Sebastian Vettel went from fighting for wins to scrapping for points in the midfield. 2.5 seasons of purgatory followed, with Ferrari forced to rebuild their entire power unit philosophy from scratch. The message was clear: cheat, and you'll pay the price for years. But here's the thing about Formula One's relationship with rule bending. It's complicated. The same sport that crucified Ferrari for their fuel flow creativity has historically rewarded teams for finding loopholes. Mercedes' DAS system in 2020 was deemed legal for that season before being banned. Flexible wings have been a cat-and-mouse game for decades. The double diffuser controversy of 2009 saw some teams gain massive advantages while others scrambled to catch up. The difference this time? The stakes are astronomical. We're not talking about a few tenths here and there. A compression ratio jump from 16 to 18 could mean 15 to 20 horsepower advantage. Rumors say it might be more. In a sport where milliseconds matter, that's the difference between domination and also-ran status. And if Mercedes really can't build a compliant engine, we're looking at a potential championship decided in the engineering room, not on the track. The FIA held an emergency meeting on Thursday, and let me tell you, it wasn't pretty. Ferrari, Honda, Red Bull, and Audi all showed up with one message: sort this out now. Because here's what nobody's talking about publicly, but everyone knows privately. This isn't just about compression ratios. This is about the fundamental integrity of Formula One's regulatory system. Here's the deal, simply put. The rules set a hard limit on the engine to keep things fair and stop costs from exploding. But Mercedes found a backdoor. They built a system that looks perfectly innocent when the inspectors are measuring it in the garage. But the second that car hits the track, it behaves like a completely different beast. They are following the rule on paper, but out on the asphalt, they are running circles around it. The problem is, when you build an entire engine philosophy around a trick like this, you can't just flip a switch and go back to normal. Mercedes allegedly cannot produce a standard legal engine that's actually fast. They've painted themselves into a corner, and now they're asking the FIA to let them stay in that corner for an entire season. The proposed compromise isn't really a compromise at all. It's Mercedes saying, let us race illegally this year, and we promise to fix it next year. And let's be real, this isn't just a minor technicality. In Formula One, this trick isn't just about numbers, it's about raw speed. We are talking about a massive horsepower advantage that you simply cannot get legally. And once you win championships with a car that shouldn't exist, you can't exactly give the trophies back. The damage is done, the history books are written, and the sport looks like a joke. Red Bull finds themselves in the bizarre position of being both victim and alleged co-conspirator. They supposedly tried to copy Mercedes' system, but couldn't make it work without exceeding the legal limits. So now they're simultaneously accused of attempting to cheat while also being the ones demanding justice. The other teams aren't buying any of this compromise nonsense. Why should they accept a season where Mercedes-powered cars have a fundamental advantage that's explicitly against the regulations? It would be like letting one football team play with 12 players because they forgot to read the rules properly. The competitive balance would be destroyed before the season even begins. And that brings us to what I'm calling the biggest bet in Formula One history. Because that's exactly what Mercedes did here. They looked at the 2026 regulations, saw an opportunity to gain a massive advantage, and rolled the dice on the FIA's ability to catch them. It was a calculated gamble that could either secure them years of dominance or blow up spectacularly in their faces. The bet was simple: build an entire power unit architecture around a system that technically violates the regulations, but only when the engine is running hot and can't be measured. Bank on the FIA's inability to detect it during standard checks. Hope that by the time anyone figures it out, you're so far ahead that the governing body has no choice but to legitimize your advantage rather than destroy the championship. It's the kind of high-stakes gamble that would make a Vegas casino owner nervous. Mercedes essentially put their entire 2026 program on the table and said, "We're all in." They didn't just bend the rules, they architected their entire engine philosophy around breaking them. And for a while, it looked like it was going to pay off brilliantly. Think about the timeline here. Mercedes has been developing this system for over a year. That means while other manufacturers were designing compliant engines within the 16:1 compression ratio limit, Mercedes was secretly building a power unit that could hit 18:1 when it mattered. They had a 12-month head start on a system that nobody else even knew existed. But every bet has a moment when the cards get flipped over. For Mercedes, that moment came when their own engineer walked into Red Bull powertrains and spilled everything. Suddenly, the secret weapon wasn't so secret anymore. The house always finds out eventually, and when it does, the reckoning is brutal. Red Bull tried to replicate the system, but quickly realized they couldn't make it work within the legal framework. That's when they became the whistleblowers, the ones who called Mercedes bluff. It's almost poetic justice. The team that Mercedes thought they could outsmart became the ones to expose the whole scheme. Now Mercedes is sitting at that poker table, cards exposed, with everyone staring at them. The FIA is holding all the power, and Mercedes is desperately trying to negotiate their way out of a situation they created. The proposed compromise isn't a compromise at all. It's Mercedes saying, look, we know we cheated, but please let us keep cheating for one more year because we literally don't know how to stop. But here's the thing about bets in Formula One. When you lose, you don't just lose money. You lose credibility, you lose competitive advantage, and sometimes you lose entire seasons. Ask Ferrari about 2020. Ask them how it felt to watch their cars struggle in the midfield after years of fighting for championships. That's what happens when your bet goes wrong and the FIA decides to make an example out of you. The irony is delicious. Mercedes, the team that's built their modern reputation on engineering excellence and playing by the rules, might have just pulled off the most audacious cheat in recent Formula One history. And they might get away with it. Not because they're innocent, but because the alternative is too messy for everyone involved. Because that's the real bet here. Mercedes isn't just betting on their ability to cheat undetected. They're betting on the FIA's unwillingness to destroy a season before it starts. They're betting that 4 teams being unable to compete is worse for the sport than 4 teams competing illegally. It's a bet on institutional cowardice, and unfortunately, it might just pay off.